See this one shit. Going live. Instagram real quick. Mic check, mic check. Yo, mic check, mic check. Yo, mic check, mic check. All right, there we go. All right, we good on YouTube. Think we on Facebook. Think we should be on Instagram as well. All right, dog. So look, all right, I ain't gonna worry about it. Let's just get into it real quick. So what up? What up? Sunday night conversation. You know, I ain't just chatting, talking about all the stuff that's going on, and some of the stuff that I've been seeing. Uh, you know, the stuff that's happening in the news. You got that birthright citizenship situation that's happening. But even outside of all of that, man, with everything that's just going on, period, bro. Like, just check in, man. Like, how you doing? Let's see, I got the Tougaloo on today. You know, HBCUs matter. So shout out to everybody who went to Tougaloo. Make sure you go and visit those HBCUs, man. As you know, right now, it's just an interesting situation and dynamic with our, with the culture. You know, some of them say we don't have no culture, but we know what the reality is. We know what the truth of it is. And I mean, even when you think about this whole immigrant situation, and how you can see some people trying to, I don't even know if it's on purpose that they're necessarily trying to take away from the contributions of, as Tariq Nasheed says, foundational Black Americans to this country. But you know, it's not anybody else's responsibility to know that story and to know that legacy, right? So, you know, if we find ourselves in a position as to where we aren't able to champion what that legacy, what our story is, and what our commitment to history, what our commitment to America, then that's our fault. You know, that's not incumbent on anybody else outside of our culture to know our story, to share our story, you know, and to promote our story. That's kind of like on us to do that. So when we can't articulate the contributions that we have made to New York City or to Memphis, Tennessee, or to Miami, just any of those places, Detroit, Chicago. Um, you can't expect it to be anybody else's responsibility to preserve and protect our legacy, right? So that's where I think we have to become better stewards at who we are, what we've contributed, what our story is, where we're going. And as they say, an idle man is the devil. Idle mind is the devil's playground. So when you wake up and if you don't direct and guide the pathway of your life and make time for those things to even educate yourself or to edify yourself on those particular stories, and then and on top of just reading about the legacy, like what are you doing to continue the legacy, what are you doing to preserve the legacy, what are you doing to further the legacy, like what is our role in that through the talents that we are individually bestowed with. What are you going to do to be a contributor? I know a lot of times we are just separate. We're separate as the fingers, and our ideals and our efforts are sometimes as separate as the fingers, and we don't really find ourselves working together. And I know a lot of the times too, we find ourselves in these positions as to where we feel like if we don't agree 100% with somebody, then we can't work with somebody. And in the world of politics and government and understanding democracy, disagreement is great for democracy. Disagreement is necessary for democracy, and disagreement will always be a part of democracy. So, choosing not to work with someone or support someone because you don't agree on their holistic ideology is pretty asinine, and it just takes away from our ability to build together. And then understanding too that people aren't finished products. Sometimes you can kind of get in that trap and get in that mindset of freezing people in their past or freezing people where they are without having that grace for growth. Malcolm X always talked about, or not always, but Malcolm X had talked about like not condemning a person because they don't know what you know. Because at the time, for all of us, we didn't know the things that we knew. So for us not to give that type of grace to other people, I think you have to judge a person based off of their willingness to grow, willingness to learn, and to evolve. And for too many times, we can see ourselves and see people freezing other people or holding people to a space and time that they may be in right now, not understanding that they may be in this space for a season or perhaps that their thoughts had not been challenged before. And so, once presented with new information, and you allow them that ability to go back, do research, ask questions, and then come to a level of understanding. Um, that's just it's a falsehood because you wouldn't want people to treat you that way as well. So in that quote that he was saying, Malcolm X said, "Don't be in a hurry to condemn because he doesn't do what you do or think as you think or as fast. There was a time when you didn't know what you know today." And so shout out to the ancestor, brother Malcolm X. And as I think about that, it leads me to another part of the discussion that I think is important, and that's for us to identify and then educate ourselves on who our renowned African American philosophers were. A lot of times we may know names, but we don't know what people taught. And we have to do a better job ourselves of understanding the concepts of what people delivered, the concepts of what people taught. So, we may know the name Martin Luther King, but it wasn't really until I read this book right here, the autobiography of Martin Luther King, and I had to find out that I didn't know anything. You can see my tabs that's in here as well at the top because it's just full of highlights, underlines, tagging pages. And because it wasn't until I actually read this book that I started to gain the true understanding. Also here I got the sister Angela Davis as well. Her autobiography. So this is one that I'm starting to go through to learn about her. But we need to do better of learning who our philosophers were and what their legacy was and what they taught, and not just only deal with the information that may have been provided to us in school in the classroom, because it's just not enough time to deal with that information and truly teach that. I believe that school, and depending on the levels that you're at, school sometimes introduces you to a person, but it's the work and the commitment that you make at home that helps you thoroughly understand a person. So when we talk about philosophers, if we talk about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, W.B. Du Bois, Nietzsche, and all the others, we need to include in that the Marcus Garveys. We need to include in that, go back thousands of years to Imhotep. We need to talk about the church fathers, those, who were of our same background, and really include them and force them into the current conversation. We don't really do a good job at that. And I believe that we leave out some of our most intelligent official or intelligent authors. And because we fail to open up the books and to read these works, we find ourselves in the positions as to where we don't understand the conditions in which we find ourselves in, and we don't understand how to navigate the obstacles where we're trying to reinvent the wheel, or we will feel defeated because we don't know how to approach the situation and how to come out with a win. And you know, my perspective, my opinion, of course, what keeps me so grounded and positive as we go through what we feel like our tumultuous times, or we feel like our industries, our community, our institutions are under attack, I not find comfort, but I find a resilience in the fact that we have these books and we have these pages and we have these speeches that we can turn to, and we can look historically at how those of our ancestors went through more trying times and had more dangerous obstacles to overcome, and how they were able to leap those hurdles with success. And I think part of the reason why we kind of struggle so much in what we're doing now is because we didn't open up those pages and we didn't learn those lessons from them. So, hold on real quick. So, if we do that, I think not only will we find answers, or we can find some techniques and apply them to our current situation today. In addition to that, we find self esteem, we find knowledge of self, which causes us to walk around and to make better decisions and to find value in the community, and not that hollow value because I'm saying that I'm proud and I'm confident because I know I'm supposed to say that I'm proud and I'm confident, but because you truly feel it, because you can truly articulate and specifically where we made impact, like how we can see the parallels between the civil rights movement and us and requiring our humanity, our dignity, and our liberty to be observed, but to also be preserved and implement that. And at the same time, see what's going over in either Africa or what's going on down in the Caribbean, like in Jamaica, and to watch them gain their independence simultaneously, and to understand that there was a motivation that was captured and instilled through the Pan African diaspora. So, that offers something, that is hard to help a person understand it, until they done the work and then they went through it and then um, they find those answers. And so, a lot of what's going on in our communities, the rates of depression, the rates of suicide, the disrespect of our fellow men and women. Um, I think a lot of it all stems from not having knowledge of self. And I think that once you gain that true knowledge of who you are, it does cause you to have a higher self esteem than what you may have had. It causes you to value the other person because you value yourself. And a lot of times when people are willing to do things to you, it's because they don't have a lot of the confidence in themselves. And also, their confidence can be found in the material clothing, right? Or it could be found in material things. And I also find it so interesting that it's when you wear the last name or the family name of a people that are outside of your community who don't do much for your community, that's what causes you to boast, brag, and to feel elevated. That just reeks of the hollowness and shallowness of your actual persona, right? And you got to just think about how much of a contradiction that is when you have to put on the last name of another people's from another part of the world who have no knowledge, recognition, and existence that you even exist, but then you spend your hard-earned dollars to further their family's ability to send their kids to private schools or to go on these 2 month long vacations, um, or to either further their family's legacy so that they can invest in their kids off of the dollars that you earn as you scrape by and get by on a day-to-day basis, but still don't have that real value of who you are. You know, anytime you have to put on something in order to feel worthy, you already lost the battle. You already lost the fight. Like you already are behind, right? But again, it's not. It's all tied into, right? It's all intertwined. There's a beautiful web that is woven. Once you do read on who we are, once you do start to begin to solve the issues of what we're doing, everybody was talking about that whole Dr. Umar in the school situation. And, shout out Dr. Umar. I saw that there was some monumental progress made on that school. Not sure if it's true or not. I just know that I saw it. But regardless of where those particular outcomes are, one of the things that I've always reconciled about the whole entire matter is most of the people who are judging whether the school comes to fruition or not haven't even built a treehouse. It's like you haven't built a treehouse. You probably haven't even built your own home that you're living in, especially if you don't own a home but you're renting. You haven't built a car. You haven't built anything. So it's like the people who have the most condemnation and critique haven't built anything. So how would you know how long it takes to build? How would you know what the permitting process is like? How would you know what it's like to find contractors and to find contractors that actually do the work? Because when you look at some of these homes that's being developed right now, people are cutting corners. They're cutting corners on piping. They're cutting corners on the beams and making sure that the nails are going into the right studs, the spacing, the flooring, second levels. I won't disclose exactly what business, but there's a business right now where they were building the second level, and this is of I guess, a commercial. This wasn't a residential. This is a commercial building. They were building the second floor, and then some people went in. Some of the surveyors or the team went in, and then they saw that the second floor was not sturdy at all, and it had a lot of issues with the way that they were connected in the structure, and they had to tear it down and redo the whole entire second floor, and that's on a commercial building. So you can only imagine how much that's caused a setback. So, just in raising money too, especially when you're trying to go at it yourself, you don't have grants and public dollars and skepticism. So it's I'm not gonna go too much down a rabbit hole or too much on a tangent, but you just have to. Moral of the story that you just have to be cautious on whose opinion you're valuing. And sometimes we can get caught up, especially in the era of social media, where everybody has a microphone, everybody has a platform, and some people feel just because they're speaking that they're giving value. And then because the person hears a message, that then they're taking that in and they're making that person's opinion then be valuable. And then it's causing them to have a certain perspective on a matter when not really breaking it down and actually analyzing who is leveling these critiques and what is it that you have done. That's the other thing. At least he's trying to do something for the people. But it's like, what are you doing for the people? What are you doing to make these improvements in the community? What are you doing to take our community from being at the bottom when it comes to household income, when it comes to generating wealth, when it comes to home ownership, when it comes to graduation rates at our HBCUs? There are some HBCUs that have graduation rates between 13 to 16%. So it's like, well, where are you at in going into those HBCUs and trying to drive up the curriculum or make improvements in the curriculum, make improvements in, of course, the graduation rate, make improvements with the faculty, volunteerism, organizational capacity. It's just so many other things that somebody can ask. All right, well, here's what he's doing, but now what are you doing? And then what do you have that you can put on the table that we can equally judge? That's the other thing. Like, if you don't have any work that can be put up for critique, for analysis, for criticism, for exploration, intellectual exploration, then what are you talking for? Like, you gotta do less talking, you gotta put your head down, and you gotta be putting something forward. That's why I typically really do give grace to people who are either doing public speaking or who are doing academic journals or papers or just whatever. Anytime somebody, even when it comes to music, anybody who puts their talents out into the public for the rest of the world to judge, you have to give a sense of grace. And a lot of the times, the people who are making the most critiques are not doing the same thing. So it's like, if I see your critique, and then you have nothing, then yeah, that's just it's just gonna roll off my back like water. It's not gonna have any value. It's not gonna stick. So I think that other people need to develop that type of mindset, because of course you're gonna have people that are gonna hate. You're gonna have people that are going to be defeatists. So that's just who they are and how they have to be. But the important thing is that their opinion should not hold that much value for you. So now, on the other side of that, though, I don't think, my opinion and observation is that our community is suffering because we do not accept critique. There is a huge issue with, and there has to be some type of, um, there has to be some type of agreement that we begin to have, um, with those who tell us that something that we're putting out has flaws. Something that we're doing, and it's hard, you know what I'm saying? Like Erykah Badu says, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, right? So, but you have to get out of that sensitivity and build, a callousness, but also to be willing to open yourself up and for people to be critical of what you're doing, and then for you to acknowledge that, hey, I did XYZ and I may have thought it was good, but when I put it out there for the world to judge it, there was a lot that came back, especially even people that I may know, who told me that it sucked, right? And anytime, that's the thing, anybody who's an expert and who's a master at something was once a beginner. And so many of us have to get better with being beginners and understanding that process of what it takes to be new at something and what that course and pathway looks like in order for us to make improvements. Because if people keep telling you that your work is good or that you did a great job on this, and they're not really telling you the truth and the facts of the matter that what you did actually sucked, you're not going to get better, right? And so appreciate the journey and the process of things. And for too many times, because we've grown up in this society where things come at you quick or available for you quick and you don't have to take any toiling and a lot of effort to find something, we don't value the journey and we don't value the process of getting to excellence. Um, and that's something that we have to, because a lot of the wisdom, a lot of the lessons are determined and are learned in the process and the journey. And that is where you really get to brainstorm. You get to try things. You get to, you get to mess up. Like all of that it's a part of it. It's that's where the reward is of value. Because if something is just given to you and it's not really earned, then you're more likely to lose it, right? You're more likely for it to just fall. And so, the ideas of overnight successes, but you're not understanding that week in and week out they put a product out and nobody heard of it, and then it's all of a sudden, because they keep going after and they keep trying to fine tune it and they maintain a level of consistency, they end up just blowing up. And you may think that it's an overnight success, but that's nowhere near what actually happened. It's just that you weren't paying attention to them along the way. Then all of a sudden you hopped on the bandwagon when everybody else hopped on the bandwagon, and it just seemed like they came from out of nowhere and it seemed like it was easy. So appreciating process and appreciating putting in that work night after night, day after day, like that's where a lot of the value is at. But that's also a part of the lacking for a lot of us, that we don't want to put in that time. And that's the thing that hurts us. Like we don't want to stick with something. So when you couple being inconsistent, and then also that when a person offers valid critiques, you don't have the humility enough to hear it because your ego is stricken, then that's what leads to ultimate failures. Even if you have cheap wins. Like that is, if you just look at a lot of different situations, that is the mathematical equation that leads to constant and ultimate failure. It's not that you're not going to have failures along the way. Failures is a part of the game. Part of winning is losing. Part of winning is losing. Even if you're getting wins for a long time, at some point you're going to lose. But the losing is where the lesson is at. And so many times I think, because, and it could be the way that the schools are set up, it could be the way that you see things on social media, it's that failure is just one of those things that people don't want to experience. And they have the fear of failure. And, what is it? It's an acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real. And so, that's one of the things that I live by. Like, you have this fear and this perception, but your perception of the failure only exists is because you have a false perception and you think that failure should not be a part of the game. And so there's a lot of examples that we can look to. Are you looking at Thomas Edison and the light bulb, and he failed 1,000 times before he did it? Or are you looking at Oprah Winfrey? Are you looking at Michael Jordan? There's just a lot of examples of where this failure thing shows up in some of our biggest stars. So why you think that you wouldn't fail is just beyond me. And then that also leads me down to this other thing of dependence versus independence. And so when I go speak, especially when I speak to young people, I always ask this question. And I ask the question and I say, what do you think is the first lesson and last lesson of life? And so they'll throw out a couple of answers. But for me, what I try to imprint on them, get to understand, is that the first lesson and last lesson of life is dependency. When you're first born, you have to depend on the doctors, you got to depend on your mother, and then to get you through birth and to be successful at the birth. And then as you go through life and you start to age, in order for you to get to 1 years old, 2 years old, three, four, and whatever, you have to depend on people to take care of you. You have to depend on people to shelter you. You can't talk, you can't walk. So it's total dependence all the way until you get to your older age, adult age, and then you become self-sufficient, right? And then as you make your way out of existence, as you start to age out and you get older, um, you go back to having to depend on something. So now you got to depend on people to, of course, make your medication that you may need. You may have to depend on doctors and nurses to take care of you. You may have to depend on family members because you're not as strong anymore. You can't get up and down stairs. You lost your balance, your eyesight, your hearing isn't good. So you got to depend on people to be patient. So I always say if the first lesson and the last lesson of life is dependence, then why do you think that you're going to go through your life and be independent of other people? Why would independence be a goal of yours? It makes absolutely no sense. So when you talk about the dependence thing, there has to be a context to it. I'm sorry, when you talk about the independent thing, there has to be a context to it. And the goal shouldn't be independent, but the wisdom of who you choose to be dependent on must be assessed. It must be um, it must be critiqued, and it must be done with a very fine tune, right? And you contextualize it of, because I'm dependent on you in this area doesn't mean I can be dependent on you in that area. And sometimes when we find ourselves in the situations of being is two ways. We either become dependent on somebody to provide for us in all of these different facets of life, or we um, we choose to become dependent on people for all facets of life in our existence, or we then try to be everything to everybody instead of us just being in the lane and providing for the person in the best way that we can. We then try to provide for them across the whole entire totality, and of course we end up getting burnt out, stretched thin, and we fall short. And so you have to be comfortable just for your own mental state of recognizing that you can't be everything to everybody, but you can be the best thing for them in the areas where you are the best. And so, if if you just walk away from that conversation, from this conversation, I'm sorry, I think that those are just some great lessons that you can actually, as we go into the week, can begin to change it. You can begin to apply, right? and you can fine tune it and you can stick with it and you can say, okay, when I wake up in the morning, how am I controlling the way my day is going to go, right? Controlling the things that you can't control. You can't control everything, right? What's your attitude, your mind state, your state of mind, right? Your mindset. Um, what you schedule to happen in that day, right? And then you learning something new. Either it's a new skill, well, not either a new skill because you got 24 hours in a day, right? And of course, if you take the 8 hours out to sleep, you still got 16. So, for those 16 hours, how do you carve up that time to invest in yourself? Um, how do you carve in that time to, as you build a muscle and work out, right? How do you build your brain muscles? How do you improve your esteem, right? How do you improve the narratives that you tell yourself? What does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis? Getting into this cycle of just waking up and allowing everybody else to just dictate what you do and to pull at your time, and or for you to just sit aimless and kill a lot of your time by being on these devices and doom scrolling, not scrolling and going through things that help improve your state of mind, but you're just looking at these things that mean nothing to you, right? That don't have a place in edifying you and improving your outcomes, right? How do you dictate and make those decisions? So that, sorry, I was checking something real quick. Yeah, how do you dictate and make those decisions so that you don't lose time, right? But then even what does your rest look like? Or how do you get better at planning your day? How do you get better at investing in a positive mindset? And it's not for you to be delusional, right? But for you, goal setting, like all of that stuff ends up leading to you feeling like you're still in control and that you're not losing control, and helps to reduce anxiety and helps for you to sit back, analyze, and say, like, yes, I have a rewarding fulfillment of life, because on my day-to-day basis, for the majority of my time, it's not to say that you're not going to get taken out, you're not going to get redirected. That's going to happen. But the problem is when that's happening more than you controlling and dictating what you do, that is where the psychological issues come from, right? And so you do that. So now you've read something, now you've learned something. If government and the politics and the situation you find yourself in is your thing and you're trying to figure out, well, how is this not as bad? What do I do for that? All of this matters based on how you direct your day, right? And then even if you want to improve your vocabulary, are you writing down new words? If you want to become more intelligent on the subject, are you going through and poring over literature and talking to people who are smarter than you in the subject? Carving out some exact time for you to get better in that particular subject matter. Like, the one thing that I've really, really noticed in my life is, especially in this era, ignorance is a choice. And I don't want to go on a whole nother tangent because I don't want to stretch this video out too long, because I believe I gave some nuggets and things to the builder, and then perhaps we can build on it outside of that, like later on. But I think one of the most important things to know is that ignorance is a choice. With the level of access that you have to books, materials, online, people, the way you can connect with people, like, have you sent the email to a person who is the lead in whatever subject matter it is that you're interested in? Again, control what you can control. If they don't respond, then hey, they don't respond. But if you kick them a message and you say, hey, I really admire your work and position, I'm trying to become better myself in this particular area, and you kick them a message and say, hey, do you mind if we can chat over Zoom? You ain't even got to be in person with nobody anymore. Even for safety and stuff like that, you could just get online and just chat with somebody over Zoom and say, hey, this is one thing. I personally did that. The elder Dr. Naeem Akbar, I grew up watching a lot of his videos, world-renowned psychologist. He's also professor at Morehouse, professor at Florida State University, went to the University of Michigan. And I admire his work, and I reached out to him one day and was like, "Hey, do you mind if I sit down and talk to you? This is what I want to do. I got some ideas. I want to make sure that what I'm discussing when it comes to ancient Africa, particularly ancient Egypt, I want to make sure that I'm on the right pathway. I got a talk coming up. Would you mind coming?" It was virtual. He hopped on. He hopped on. Text me. I can show you text messages in my phone from me to him, just about different things where I reached out and he reached back. I'm not saying that somebody always is, but what I'm saying is that if you don't put yourself in the position and if you don't take the efforts and become proactive, that I can rest assured that somebody's going to be proactive towards you and you're going to be working for somebody else's goals and you're going to be working to build somebody else's dreams. So that's what, I think that's the level of importance, and that's how we as a people begin to make these improvements, because as we do these things individually, and if everybody else is, it's a domino effect and people are starting to get on the same page, you're never going to have perfection, right? But you can always have improvement, right? Atomic Habits, James Clear has talked about getting 1% better every day, 1% better every week. And eventually by the time you get down to, if you work on getting 1% better every single day, starting from now, and you get to a year from now, 365 days from now, guess what? Do the math. Whatever you was working on, you're going to be 365%. Ideally, if you get 1% better every day, you can get 365% better by the end of the year on whatever it is that you was working on. They have a, let me see something real quick. They have this thing. What is, you will become better than 90% of the world. Let's see real quick. All right, so they got this idea, right? How do you become? It's called the 90% rule of effort, and they also like how to become the top 10%. And what it says is that consistent, genuine effort in a specific endeavor will make you better than 90% of the world. This is a motivational principle based on the observation that widespread disengagement, mediocrity, and lack of persistence are the norm rather than the exception. It suggests that because most people do not fully commit to mastering a skill, you can rise to the top 10% or higher by simply being dedicated, focused, and hardworking. So, whatever it is that you are engaged in, if you dedicate time to it every single day or the majority of your days, just because you are working at it effortless, like with effort, and you're working at it tirelessly, by the end of the year, you'll become better at that particular thing than 90% of the world. And when I first heard that, it just really stuck with me. Um, and it's just like in that particular thing, Bruce Lee kind of has a similar concept when he says, I'm not afraid of the person that knows 1,000 different kicks. I'm afraid of the person who does the same kick 1,000 times. Like, that just really changes and it really puts these things into perspective on how just finding what your lane is, what you're passionate about, and just looking for a sense of improvement. You're not looking for perfection, but in the midst of striving for perfection, you're going to land at excellence. And just wanting to even be better at it. Well, one of the things I do is I study languages. And I can remember when I first started studying Spanish, I knew no Spanish, like outside of hola and como estas, like no Spanish at all. And I started studying Spanish and I would dedicate time to it. I couldn't, if I heard it, it just sounded so foreign. Everything just sounded so foreign. But as I kept working on it over time, the words started to make more sense. I started to understand the sentence structure. I started to retain more words, and just understanding the concept of how the language flows and masculine and feminine. And then I went from not knowing any Spanish to then being able to go to Costa Rica and navigate Costa Rica while speaking Spanish, or going down to Calle Ocho in Miami and being able to order Cuban coffee, order food, or ask for directions in Spanish, like talking to people, translating for other. Like I just begin to know a lot more than I did when I first started. And so it's these different things that you can do where you can take these ideals and then you can make them reality. But it's like, hey, you got to start today. Like, whatever you keep on procrastinating and waiting, whenever you do get started, you're going to wish you started it yesterday. That's real. And so if we find those things, we do those things and everything else that I talked about, um, then, for me, I can only talk about what worked for me. You can find a sense of pure satisfaction in your life, and you wake up with a passion because you know that you are controlling what your day looks like. So hopefully, the message, like I said, Sunday conversation, not too long, but hopefully a message and some of the things that I talked about today will stick. It will inspire you. That's the goal. Please understand too that who is it? Mark Manson has this really good book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it's a motivational book. But he has this thing about the do something principle. And a lot of times people wait to be inspired or they wait to become motivated before they do action, where he kind of flips it on his head. And whatever it is that you want to do, so if it's a workout goal, if it's reading, if it's learning language, whatever it is, you do it, you do the action. And then as you stick with it and you make gains and you learn things, that will inspire you and motivate you to then do the action. So it's an interesting way of the cycle, because if you keep waiting for inspiration and motivation, then you'll never find it. One of the things I do when before I start studying languages is I watch other people doing language. So shout out to Kazu Languages. Shout out to Shalma NYC. I used to watch a dude named Frankie Light. Um, Golorimi Languages. So I'll just turn their videos on YouTube and then watching them interact with people. Um, that will then inspire me to want to go and be like, all right, let me go ahead and let me study these languages because I want to have those same interactions with people do. So whatever the action is you want to do, click on the video on YouTube, go to TikTok, go to something before you engage in it and do it. And then just make it fun, bro. Don't take life too seriously. It's not like any of us make it out alive anyway. All right, y'all. Have a powerful week. Make